Welcome to the Hublife Podcast. Today we've got three fantastic guests. We've got next to me in the amazing red jumper, Jamie Smith, Organising and Local Mobilization Manager. It's a long title. Trussell come up with some long titles. That's for the east of England, isn't it?
That's right.
That's right. Good. And then Saffron over there, and you are the Engagement and Advocacy Lead. Is that your job title?
That is, yeah.
Reach in Haverhill, and Reach run the food bank with underneath the umbrella of Reach. Maybe we'll get into a little bit about that today. And then Kate McIntosh, from who your former title is a local organiser, I believe, from Cambridge City Foodbank.
Yep.
Super. Thank you ever so much for coming. I'm actually really interested in talking to you guys. I've had a meeting with Jamie for the people at home. I had a conversation with him, but I wanted to hear from the people doing the work on the ground. So, we got you in. So, Jamie, if you could, can you provide like an overview for the guys at home of what organising and local mobilisation is? Because the word organising, like outside of the charity sector, probably is like, well, that just means putting things in order. So, if you can explain like the umbrella of what the context of that is within the Trussell Trust specifically, and how it plays a role in addressing hopefully the root of the causes of food poverty, which is what this podcast is all about, talking about ending the need for food banks. So, go for it.
Thanks. So, organising is about individuals and understanding that individuals have got power. They might have like voting power. They might have financial power. All types of power, but it's about individual people coming together with their own individual power and building collective power. So the more people you have, the bigger your movement, the more power you have. And it's about those people who have like experience of maybe coming to the food bank, people who need a food bank, who are like affected by whatever's driving poverty, destitution. Maybe they haven't got enough money to, pay their rent or buy food. Those people who are experiencing that coming together and actually understanding they've got the power to change something. So you bring those people together and then you support those people to understand what it is that's like driving that destitution. And then you talk to them about what is it that you might be prepared to do about it. And then over time, you build relationships with those people. You build those individuals' capacity, capability and confidence. And then you work with them, not for them, not to them, to support them to deliver some change, long-term change.
Which is very different than a lot of the charity sector model of helping people. Like you've got a need, we fulfil that need. So it's sort of not flipping on its head, but it's changing the way we do things.
Yeah. So at Trussell Trust, the food banks in the Trussell Trust community provide amazing support to people who need help, right? People who are in crisis. And it's about like, how do we make sure that people who are hungry get the food that they need, whilst at the same time thinking, what is it that is driving people to the doors of food banks? And how can those people take control and change the system, if you like?
Well, that's a good overview, I think. So people at home can sort of understand that now. So if we get into like the actual specifics of it at your food banks as local organisers then, and sharing a few specific details of your projects, because I actually, if I'm honest, I don't know anything about them. I've purposely not looked into it. What I did was I Facebook, Google searched both of you just to get a generic sort of idea of where you're from and stuff, because it's the first time we've met today. But the only thing I found out really about Saffron, if we go with you first, is that you're passionate about wine. and I had a meeting with Henry. Is technically your boss, is he?
He is, yeah.
And he likes wine as well.
Yeah,
so
I think that's how I got the job.
Yeah, that's how you got the job. Yeah, liking wine. And that you really wanted Joe McElderry to win X Factor 2009.
Oh my God. How did you...
It was like the third post down. So it popped up.
I need to, sort my social media out, clearly.
Delete.
Yeah, that is embarrassing, but I was obsessed with him at the time.
Robbed.
Yeah. I can't remember who by. That's how much, clearly.
It meant to you a lot
him,
back then. But that's all I know about you and about your project. So if you can give a little bit of specifics about the projects that you're doing, or project if it's just one.
Yeah.
So if you can, do us that, and then we'll move over to you, Kate, and find out what you're doing.
Yeah, of course. So I started in January 2022 as part of the organising project, and spent most of the first year really just speaking to clients, speaking to stakeholders and the community about what local issues there are in Haverhill. So what is the main reason why people are coming to the food bank or hitting financial crisis, financial hardship? And mental health came out as the top reason for that. So last year, sort of fast forward to year 2, in order to really understand what locally was going on, we did a lot of consultation with clients, asking them about their journey of getting mental health support, what barriers there were, what things worked really well. And after that, we did a little bit of data, so of clients and people that rang up the food bank, just understanding how many had experienced poor mental health, and it was 88%, and that was between February and April last year. So that a huge number, clearly, the majority of clients.
And probably both the driver of the use of food bank and the result
it's
of
kind of a symptom and a cause, really. It's either, if you're suffering with poor mental health, you're more likely to fall into financial crisis, or if you're experiencing financial crisis, you're more likely to experience poor mental health. So it's like really two quite different elements, but as you say, a vicious cycle once you sort of hit that point. So in order to really create change, I set up an action group in Haverhill, so with local stakeholders, really, 2 mental health charities that operate in Haverhill, to understand, again, sort of these are the barriers we're facing, what possibly could the solutions be? And as I say, clients were really a big part of helping us identify solutions. The group has grown quite big. We now engage with local GPs, the local health alliances, schools as well. So it's a really representative view, because this role is not only about helping our clients, but it's preventing future clients needing food banks. No one should fall into crisis. So if we can create the opportunities and create the infrastructure to have better mental health, it's overall quite good for everyone. So that's sort of a big element, is the mental health campaign at the moment, really.
That's where most of your focus is and most of your time.
Yeah.
And that's crazy. Like, some people at home might think it's weird that it's like a year's worth of planning and gleaning data and just relationship building before you even start doing anything. Yeah. And like, for people who are doers in the charity sector and naturally like, oh, there's a problem, let's fix it. Yeah. It probably feels incredibly foreign to do, but I think has great value. So your one then, your projects, how did it come about? How did you end up choosing which project you started, or give us an overview.
Well, I'm in the first year that Saffron mentions, right? So I've been in the role just over 6 months. So we don't have a clear, specific goal that we're working towards yet, largely because of the amount of time that it takes, like really investing in people and building relationships to get to the heart of what's really going on in people's lives that we can combat locally. So I am working with a kind of community that we've already got around the food bank, because we're lucky enough to have 2 social supermarkets that we sort of support the management of. And because we see those people more regularly, and they also come and queue and wait for the shop together, there's a real sense of community there already. And that sense of community and like a little bit of belonging is actually really useful to be able to tap into when we're talking about what is going on in your life, what are your peers worried about, and what, if we're going to act collectively, and they know the kind of the group they're in, there's a sense of that team spirit, really, if you like. So it's been really useful to be able to just spend time with those people and not only learn from them about what's going on in Cambridge, in our community, that we could change, but also see very quickly actually how much those people have to be able to give to their community. The leadership skills, the charisma, the drive. So I'm working really closely with people we've already identified as potential leaders. I mean, they're already leaders, a lot of them. Yeah. I'm also investing a lot of time in just being in our welcome centres when people come in to collect food. And if they're open to it, and a lot of people are, just having that conversation around what's led you here today, tell me a bit more about why you've needed the food bank. Explaining, a bit about what the role is, and that we're looking into what we can do upstream to stop people needing the food bank eventually. And I found I've learned so much about what is going on that is beyond what we can collect, sort of the headline figures of the causes of the need for food banks. That real local insight has been invaluable so far.
Yeah, that's what I find interesting as well, that it is local projects to deal with a particular cause that might be to that locale. So you'll probably come up with a completely different project to Saffron, even though you might have overlap and things like that. But it's possibly what's the biggest piece of the pie in your local region that you could have an impact in. I think that's why it's so interesting. And what I suppose for me, I talked to Jamie about it. What's makes me not reluctant to enter into it, but because it's so grey and so vast. And particularly me, I'm someone who's like, well, let's find out what the thing is that we need to fix and fix it straight away. Where, you must have a lot of patience doing the job you're doing to have hundreds of conversations and then go through the data, compiling that data to see what rises to the top, to see what you need to address. So talk about that process then, because that, like the conversations with client, how does that happen? Because you're in the middle of it, you've perhaps already done a lot of it and have got a project out of it. But what does that look like?
Yeah, it's as kind of Kate says, it's really speaking to people when they come and collect the food. And it's just simply sitting down, having a cup of tea and asking how you are. And it all starts off like that and just saying, look, we can make local change. I think this is why the project's really good, because if you're campaigning nationally, it's hard to always see the end goal. We say, look, this is what we're doing locally. We want to support you in your town where you've grown up, where you love and you want to see flourish. And it's having those conversations of hope with people as well and saying, look, we hear you, we understand what you're going through, and we want to walk alongside you out of this crisis. I don't know if you've had sort of similar conversations, but that's bringing people on that journey. It's not saying, right, I've spoken to you, tick the box, move on. It's let's do this together, really.
Yeah, a lot of listening by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, which maybe the charity sector we're not very good at generally. It's more us telling people what they need.
Doing, which is also okay, right?
Yeah, you need it all, don't you? But it's maybe something we've been missing for the last few decades, perhaps. But so perhaps with UK, there aren't any outcomes that you've seen at all because you're on the early stages of developing a project, but maybe there are that are maybe immeasurable or intangible. But particularly for you, Saffron, if you've already started down the road of starting a project, are there any outcomes or changes you think you've achieved through the project already? And I know that's really difficult when it's early doors. And if not, what are the hopes? And maybe you've got some ideas about what route you might be going down because you've already had them conversations, and what you hope to see change in your local community.
I think some of the outcomes we've seen so far is building on the great work that's happening within the community. So we at Reach have partnered up with Open Mind, a local mental health charity. We've got one of their volunteers who comes to our hub on a Monday and offers that listening ear, that support, that signposting. Because what we were finding is we could tell people, oh, there's Open Mind on a Wednesday, but actually clients getting there was a barrier because they didn't know the location. It's quite a big church hall. It could be quite intimidating. Whereas having her with us means we can the client can build that relationship there and then. So
is your long-term goal within the project to just expand the breadth and depth of provision within Haverhill then?
Yeah.
That's like what you're aiming for?
Yeah, and really work with statutory partners as well. I said we want to bring those services closer. There's issues with transport getting to Bury and the cost of it. So where we can, it's actually, this really works. Come with us on that journey. And we've had a real good appetite, I'd say, from statutory partners that want to come and work with us, to provide services.
So not really a pushing and a holding people to account and saying, come on, guys, come on, we could do this. And they're that's what we want to do.
Exactly. And I think it's important at the start, when we first had those conversations, we did highlight the barriers. We said, look, these are the issues. However, we want to work in a solution-focused way. We don't want to get held up on all the problems that there could be. This is what we've got here, which is really working. Let's build on this together. And that approach, I feel, has really worked. Helped us to bring GPs around the table, bring health around the table, because we're having different sort of conversations. We're here, ready, waiting. We've got good provision, but we want to build on it together. And that's, it been really good.
Cool. With UK, then, any outcomes that are desired or changes that have already occurred in that short space of time?
I think I will say one point about the change you can achieve with individual people, actually, because I think there is something in the conversations you have, like one-to-ones in organising, where if you get someone thinking that they could be part of changing things, where previously they might have felt like they had no power at all, that actually is a really good outcome in and of itself, because it might mean that down the line, when their life's a bit more stable, they're much more likely to go and do something in their community that's going to benefit other people, that's going to empower the voices of them in their community. So I feel like quite strongly that it's the act of doing the organising is also good for the sake of it. something that's been coming up a lot recently in Cambridge is people who are sort of in precarious work situations. So maybe they're on 0 hours contracts. For whatever reason, their pay is far too low, or their working conditions just aren't adequate for them to have a stable life. And actually, when I was kind of tuning into it, I've started kind of mentioning at the end of a conversation with people now, is this something you've experienced? And it's interesting, given that the majority of people who come into our food banks at that present moment don't have someone in their household who's working. It's interesting the amount of people who have had previously some sort of situation at work, which has meant that they've had to leave work because they weren't earning enough and ended up in the benefit system, which is just demonising them. It's extremely hard to work with. For most people, I mean, it's really hard to get out of a position once you're facing like benefit sanctions, for example. So it's interesting that there's actually a lot in common with some of the people we're speaking to, whether it have been 5 years ago, something that's caused them whether it's that thing that's caused them to end up on the path that's meant that they've needed a food bank eventually, or it could be that they, were made redundant last week. So I think that's something we're definitely looking into, and the outcome there could be all sorts of things, couldn't it? And I think that's a good example of something that could be solved on a national level, but actually that we could really make a difference locally as well. And again, we could make a difference for, say, 50 people, and that is that could be life-changing for 50 people in the future, So, there's a million other things you could do, right?
Yeah, and that's what I find amazing about people who do your sort of work, is that it's you've got to be someone who's very open and visionary of being able to see a landscape and go, right, there's all different ways we can go here. Because I'm not sure. I'm like that, but I applaud you for what you're doing. It must be a lot of time put in for not feeling like very little fruit to start with, and then it's going to maybe 10 years down the road you have an oak tree that's grown from the seeds you're planting today. Although I'm sure you get little wins on the way as well.
I just wanted to take a minute, while I've got one, to ask you to please subscribe to the channel and click the notifications bell. It only takes a second. Come on, you can do it. Do it. Thanks.
On that then, so I think you're both probably going to be biased about this, but how required do you think local organising is? How big a piece of the pie is it for ending the need for food bank? And obviously you do this as a job, so you're going to be biased, but I still want your opinion on it. How much of it do you think is required for other food banks to get on board who aren't doing it already? How much impact is it going to have relative to other things on the table that we're all trying to do?
I can start. I think that the problem of not just growing poverty and hardship in the UK, but the entrenched poverty we have in the UK at the moment that we've seen developing over the last decades, the scale of the problem is such that we need every town and city in the UK to have a growing number of people who are not just aware of the problem, but willing and able to take action. And
not just talking about it, doing something about it as well.
Yeah. And organising, community organising, local organising, I think that has to be the key. And it's one of these things, like it is not only a complicated system for people who turn up at the food bank when they're encountering, and trying to claim the benefits that they're actually entitled to, or trying to find work when actually it might be really difficult to get there. There's no support. It is also like unjust. Like the system is built to disadvantage those people, and we can't just work within it and the hope that we're going to end the need for food banks. We have to actually actively try to change that system. And it is actually going to take quite a lot of people working together to get that done. Otherwise, we're never really going to get rid of this issue, this ingrained issue. We will just continue having food banks. And I think we all know that we actually just can't carry on. Every member of staff I talk to, when I meet someone who works at a different food bank, it's like, are you okay? That winter was crazy, wasn't it? It is how are we surviving? Yeah, like how are food banks surviving? We just keep carrying on because we have to, but actually what we also really have to do is say that's enough, and it kind of requires everyone in our community getting on board and doing something about it.
Yeah, and part of that is all local communities get on board to create a herd that could have a national impact on the national benefits, but at the same time, the local welfare assistance schemes, I think I overheard you talking about potentially on the way in about, the possibility of them stopping or being smaller, or the conversations around them. That I suppose you can have an impact locally, perhaps if the funding's there centrally, but how that funding is distributed within your local area as well. So any battles you having around that at the minute in your locations? Maybe it's a bit raw at the minute.
I think, it is difficult. I mean, we've written to our local council about the Household Support Fund.
Can you just explain to people at home what that is?
Yeah, of course. So that was introduced in, I think it was October 2021, to support people really in local communities that are experiencing financial hardship and crisis. So it was a fund, central government funding for local councils to allocate that based on the need of their area. So in Suffolk, I mean, I can't fault how they've spent the money because it's been fantastic. So
I've heard good things.
Yeah,
because
really,
we're in
really
Norfolk across the border here, so we.
So they've funded local welfare assistance schemes. So that's cash grants or white goods that people can apply for. Free school meal vouchers for children during school holidays. So that's a £15 voucher. They've also allocated some funding to voluntary organisations. So we managed to apply for some of that funding. And they also provide funding for district councils offering housing support. So that's usually used to pay off arrears and things like that. So what we've found is having those cash injections or those opportunities to give people cash has been really, really beneficial because, yes, we can give food and at Reach we can offer debt advice, but food parcel isn't going to pay off your arrears. It's not going to fix your car that's gone in for an MOT and needs something repaired. Those cash grants are really, really beneficial. And there's no confirmation from central government if that funding is coming after the 31st of March. And it's unclear as to what support will be available after that time.
So do you think everyone should be pushing nationally to ask that question, but banging the drum locally as well to get district councils and county councils to be asking the question of central government at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, Suffolk County Council have gathered so much evidence to prove that, their schemes have worked as well. And they have also written to government. But the thing that's difficult is you can't fault local governments because their funding has been slashed completely. So this is a central government issue. But if everywhere locally we can provide as much evidence as we can and we're all banging on the drum, it's sort of organising in that respect, then hopefully something will change. But it's really, really worrying. I mean, we're already seeing more children, more families coming to us. And this is with the support, right? Not afterwards. And I do think it's just going to be a tidal wave of need. You've got the government saying that the cost of living crisis is gone, but the week before water bills went up, it's like, it's not true. Come and have a chat and see what we're seeing and see that this funding is imperative, Yeah,
the local welfare assistance scheme particularly. I think many people who have never had any engagement with the welfare system probably didn't even know there was local welfare assistance schemes out there. And yet I think the people I've talked to who are on the fence with benefits, not against them, but not necessarily pro, let's increase them, I think I usually have more appetite for a local welfare assistance scheme to be funded for a local area than a national one going up. And so I think banging the drum on both things I think is helpful, and maybe as organisers the local side of things is something that we can get involved in local food banks. So any challenges you found on the way? I can see in my periphery, I can see a nod already. Yeah, any of the major challenges, because we're considering at Thetford whether we venture into this sort of stuff. And I say it on camera all the time, I want to steal ideas and learn off people, all their mistakes beforehand, so I don't have to waste time, because I'm a very busy man. So any challenges you found on the way that you wish you hadn't gone down, or things you've learned that you wouldn't do? I know that might be different for different areas, but I'd like to get your experience.
I'd say an immediate challenge I have is you say, okay, well, we're trying to end the need for food banks. They say, how are you going to do that then? Surely you're not, that's never going to change. Surely only the government could do that. So that is hard, right? And it's also particularly hard when you're talking to someone who might be just coming out of a moment of real crisis or is in pretty chronic hardship. to get them to have that bit of hope, but not only the hope that they their situation might change because of some force that doesn't feel part of their control, but that they could also have some control over it, right?
Yeah.
And their power might increase, that they could be part of that change. That's really hard. That's just first thing.
Especially when you're in the midst of a situation that's dire, you don't really care about a month's time. Like, because we're wired that way. We care about today. Like, if we're hungry, we care about today. We don't want to save energy. We don't want to put money aside. We need this today. And so, like, I suppose if you're in the middle of, I suppose that must be a challenge. If people making people see further down the road.
Yeah.
But I suppose if you're helping them at Foodbank at the same time, you're doing both at the same time, rather than just asking them to project into the future about what a difference they can make. But we're gonna help you in your need now, but we want you to help other people and yourself for a year's time.
I think that relates to another challenge as well, actually. I don't want to make it sound all doom and gloom, because it is also great. But you also actually don't necessarily want to be talking to someone at that moment of like crisis. Or at least you don't really want to be putting any pressure on them to think about a month's time. So it's, where do you find your people? Like, where do you find those people who might have experienced it? Their situation is a bit precarious. They might need the food bank in a month's time. You know, where do you go and find them, talk to them? Because it's reasonably easy to go and sit in a food bank centre as people are coming in and chat to them there. But yeah, a lot of those people are literally just thinking about the next couple of days. Fair enough. That's what they've got to do. Yeah. So that's another thing as well. It's, you know, how do you find the people you're actually organising?
Do you do anything where you follow up with people who sort of got over their situation and are back on, you know, on not the right track, but, you know, in a less precarious situation, and then make contact then and do follow up conversations? Is that how it works?
Yeah. I've been meeting with people, say,
write
a
that
few
down.
weeks
Solution
afterwards.
to the biggest problem.
Yeah, I mean, that helps, right? But I mean, with the way things are, a lot of people, it's not really as simple as you get out of the crisis. We know that. But if it's a few weeks later, you know, make a point of keeping in touch with people, meeting up with people, checking in with them. And I think that's why it's quite important to build that relationship. And even if you're not going to, in that first interaction you have, say, okay, well, what role are you going to play on the campaign team? Yeah. You say like, look, I'm really interested in your experience. I think we've had a really good conversation. It'd be really great to just check in with you, have a chat in a few weeks about this work we're doing. And like, let them know what the point is as well, but make it clear that nothing's required of them. It's an opportunity for them, really.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I was working with a client, I think I met him last springtime, and I was at one of our food bank sessions, and I said, look, are you free for a chat? He didn't want to talk, didn't want to be there, just hated the idea of having to go and get food. And I said, look, take my number and call me. I'm here if you just want to have a chat. And I met him monthly until recently, and we've helped him with food primarily. We helped him with a PIP application. He was going through a lot of health problems at the time. And to see him from then not wanting to talk, literally dart in, dart out, to going round, having a cup of tea, coffee, getting his PIP application through, seeing him have more money.
Do you, within reach, get other people, other departments within reach to do all that sort of things?
Yeah, we've got a fantastic advisor who, I don't want to say her only job because it is incredible, but helps clients with benefit and PIP applications. She's even appealed PIP applications. I think she's gone to court with people. And she, I kind of introduced them, and she helped him do a PIP. And that was a real weight lifted off his shoulders, you know, because he'd been listened to. You know, he's going through all of this hardship. And finally, we've recognised that, and he's just a totally different person from not wanting to talk to, you know, ringing up for a chat, you know. And that's, I guess, because it is difficult and there's lots of negativity at the moment around the cost of living, having those sort of stories or those clients is really, it gets you through, because you know that you've changed someone's life. That sounds really inspirational, but we have, you know. And
I think you need them wins, don't you? Because like we talked to our CEO of Citizens Advice and in both the areas that we work in, and the CA workers who see, you know, same as the food bank workers, really hear and see so many difficult situations over the time. It can wear you down, you know, and a lot of people carry a lot of other people's burdens. So like to get them wins must, you know, help drive you to continue doing what you're doing. So there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
with the decision-making process then of how you decide on a project, like, because you haven't done this yet or in the midst of doing it, and you've already made that decision of what route you're going down. But how does that decision-making process happen? Because obviously it's driven by you or your team or bosses or, or maybe help with Trussell and moulding that. But effectively, the idea being that it sort of comes from the information and the clients. And so how do you involve clients in the decision-making process? How does that work? Because so often it's like someone at the top of a tree just makes all the calls and then learns all the errors on the way, and then decides to ask people who actually know what they're doing. When managers ask people on the shop floor, how should we actually run this now? And so like, what does that look like in your decision-making about the project going forward?
I don't think we could have ignored mental health provision as an issue. As I said, it came up every client I spoke to. What is the main issue for you? It's experiencing poor mental health and a lack of support out there for my poor mental health. It came through with stakeholders as well. So we can do food, but supported housing organisations, it was one of their top issues, and just couldn't not focus on it.
So in some ways for you, it was like an easy thing because it was like, this is the biggest thing that we're dealing with. So
I mean, don't get me wrong, there was lots. I think I put it all in a table. We had 38 issues and a lot of them were national. So, I mean, universal credit really came out as the top. However, we are campaigning with Trussell Trust on universal credit. The likelihood of us changing the whole benefit system in Little Haverhill is not likely. So we had to sort of take into account what could we potentially change locally. And we just couldn't ignore mental health. It was such an issue. And there was a lot of passion from the community and from people to actually make a change. So we knew there'd be a bit of appetite around a potential campaign as well.
So like, obviously trying to, the actual outcome of the project of making more provision. So do you try and involve clients in how that looks? So like, for instance, we had a Mark Snowden on about emergency housing, a place in Elm Road in Thetford. And I thought it was amazing the council sort of liaised with people with lived experience in like, what's important in emergency housing. What do you even think on? They just talked about having pet policies and things that we hadn't even thought about. And so like, when it comes to like access or where it is, do you try and involve people in them decisions rather than it just coming from the people within reach as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, one of the main questions I asked sort of doing the initial research is, okay, what has been your journey of mental health support and what would you like to see change, and be quite specific about that. And all of that feedback led us into, so I wrote a report at the start of the campaign as well, led us into our initial recommendations. It was about 2 pages just full of recommendations, and then has now led us into our 6 priorities as part of the action group. There's been different priorities as different sort of stakeholders have come in, but ultimately we keep clients along that journey with us, really, because there's no point us saying, oh, let's spend all the money on this, and actually it could not help anyone, because that's not what the community needs. So it's very much, we won't do anything without a sort of consultation process as well.
So you haven't got to that stage yet, or you have, and it's no, not at all.
No.
So it's something you're going to have to go through.
Yeah,
and learn from other food banks who've already done it. So.
Yeah, and I think it can work in different ways based on a different context as well, because in some places, I know other organisers, there's considerably less opportunity than I get in Cambridge to actually talk to people who are receiving food parcels, right? Just because of their model. So they've had to look at what's going on locally and other groups that might be, campaigning on issues that would actually be really useful. And they've sort of dedicated time to organising that community and lending their support there. So that's kind of like picking an issue in a really different way, but it still is actually absolutely having people with lived experience leading the way. And that there are lots of other ways of doing it. And I think in Cambridge, it's pretty likely that we will just see what sticks, because for us, I think because we have this sense of community already among some of the people we know who are really interested in this, who are our visitors or members, I don't think we're going to give them something and say, go and do it. It's because it's for them to do, right? it's going to materially improve their lives and the lives of the people around them and their communities. And it's something that we'll do collectively, but it's not that we're asking if it's okay with them and then doing it. It's what they want to do, you know, and they'll get the support from our food bank and myself to do that. But, and we'll consider, you know, opportunities in the local policy agenda and what we might be likely to win that year because a local councillor said they might be interested in it, or, you know, we'll consider all of those outside factors as well. But I think it has to come from them.
Maybe Jamie could answer this better, but with regard to end projects, because it's, when you're doing this, it's not necessarily just one project that has to occur. It could be multiple things at the same time, although that might be more difficult. But would the hope be that a project sort of gets up and running and then it's the food bank then take a backward step and it carries on with the people who you've put in place, and then you choose another pin to try and knock down in the community? Would that be the idea, or would it be that the food bank's always there helping with momentum and encouragement and funding?
We have got some fantastic local organisers who do multiple projects and spin a lot of plates at the same time. Who are amazing organisers working with like amazing people, right? And the idea, like at its core, organising is about building those structures with those together with those people, so that you are able to just like step away from it. It becomes self-sustaining because all of those people have those relationships with each other, and they all have like their own roles in that team that they play as a community. So the idea is that you are able to, once you support them to do that, is that it sustains itself. That is organising in itself. So those people are at the heart of like deciding what it is that they do, who does it, how they do it, and then you are, if you like, just there to cheer them on all the way.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, rather than, because when we talked to Gary Lemon, he talked about the dangers of food banks doing lots and lots of different projects, and then just the communities become reliant on this one organisation that is the Trussell Trust Food Bank in the town. And then if something happens, all of the provision's gone. And so, like, I really like that model. It's much better. So, again, you're probably biased, but do you think that, or how well do you think, like, even having conversations like this, are the skills that are learnt across all the local organising food banks in your region, are they transferable to other food banks? Can lessons be learned from each other? And I think I know the answer because I think I'm learning a lot today already. But and how important do you think this side of Trussell's work is in ending the need for food bank? And again, you're biased, but I want you to bang your drum.
I think that anyone who experiences a food bank, and whether that's someone who like walks through the doors because they need food, people who give up their time of their own choice to volunteer at a food bank, or people who work in a food bank, or trustees who, you know, set the strategic direction for food banks, all accept that things cannot go on like this. Like, my question to people is, so what are you going to do about it? Because you keep saying more and more people need us, right? And how can you continue to do that without actually addressing what the like root causes of that driving people to your doors is? So yeah, when people say we are seeing more people than we've ever seen before, you need to ask the question, so like, what are you going to do about it, right? But I completely accept that we need to get food to people who need it. And so it's about doing that at the same time as saying, well, what are we going to do about it? And not just saying that, but actually doing it.
Yeah, and not just centrally from Trussell, but
That's
local
right.
food banks.
People who are in those communities, whatever role they have in the food bank, someone walking through the doors, volunteers, staff, trustees, is about those people in that community actually saying, here's what we're going to do about it. Who's going to do it? This is how we're going to do it, and then doing it.
Yeah. So have you got any advice then to any food banks who might be watching? Because we have people from other food banks who watch this podcast who maybe don't do this sort of work already. Any advice to them to get them going?
Yeah, I would say if you feel like you have had your busiest Christmas, busiest January ever, and thinking, we thought the same last year, I would probably pause for a second, which I know is really hard to do because you want to get food to people who are hungry, right? Is to ask yourself, what are you going to do about it?
He's asking me that. Do you hear
and
that? Because he mentioned January there.
And what can you do about it, right? Because Yeah, amongst all of the like, day-to-day stuff is people are doing good by getting people who need food, right? Or people who need help. And that is a good thing, right? And we also need to ask ourselves a question, what am I prepared to do about it? Not just helping this person, but actually like doing things with them and maybe for them sometimes, hopefully not to them, but doing things with people, because that's the only way that, like Kate talked about, changing the system. And we talk about a lot about local stuff, right? And about what we can change locally. And that is really important. And if we're going to actually end the need for food banks, we need to maybe start small with local stuff, but think big about the system.
Great. Well, last question, and I'll read this. What should we be talking about on the podcast or in society generally that we're not, that feeds into the ending food poverty? Anything that, so like off script, anything that you think we should be talking about that could be anything to do with your jobs or not. So what should we be talking about? We and the wider we. It's for all of you.
Workers' rights and the power of trade unions to enforce them.
My personal opinion is that I think that we really do need to change the social security system because people do not have enough money. And once we have done that, I think that we need to start having a conversation about, is it right that companies who make loads of money are employing their workers on pay where those people still need to have it topped up by taxpayers and the state?
Yeah, especially if they're working near full-time hours.
Yeah, exactly.
I think poverty overall, so not just food poverty, we need to take some of the focus away from food because it's so symptomatic. It's a good sticking plaster, but when people come to us, there's so much more that goes on. So as you say, picking up on the key issues that bring people to food banks and other solutions, not just an emergency food parcel.
And I just thought of something else, which is that I think that we need to talk about things like there's enough money out there and there's enough money in the system. It's about where that money goes and who has that money. And the same goes for like power. So there's power, right, in society, but a small number of people have a large amount of power. And we need to think about how people as citizens, how they can, if you like, have more control over what it is that they do and what affects their lives and about changing their lives.
Cool. Well, I think that's a good place to stop. Thank you ever so much for coming. I've really enjoyed that, and I'm gonna enjoy listening back and writing down all the things that I'm supposed to be doing. And thanks for coming. Really enjoyed it. And please join us next week. No, 2 weeks time on the podcast. We have got another great guest, but we've also got some hot news off the press, which we're going to share you some details about doing a live podcast with a live studio audience. We'll give you more details in 2 weeks time. See ya. If you enjoyed this episode of the Hublife Podcast, then why not check out another one over here, or try something a little different over there.